Bishop Ursula, welcome to Las Cruces. Hope you like it here a lot. Speaking as a hometown kid, this is a nice place to grow up. This is a nice place to be.
Well, you know, when I came for the announcement of my appointment on January the 10th, it was my first time in the city, and that's when I discovered what a charming city it is, and I had not realized how diverse it is as well. And certainly enjoy the fact that there's a wonderful university here in town, and the military nearby, and so I think it gives a nice mix to the community, and really looking forward to being a part of it.
Number one, what will be your goals and areas of focus as you begin your time as a new bishop?
Sure. Well, you know, my first goals are to get to know, first of all, the priests, because they're my first collaborators in the ministry. And of course, the team, the staff here in the pastoral center, the religious sisters, religious brothers, and to get to know the parishes. So that'll be in the next 3 months or so. I'll be celebrating confirmations in all the parishes. So I'm looking forward to paying visits to the parishes. And I mentioned to the priests, I had a nice visit with them back in January, the day after the announcement. And they were very welcoming, very excited, and kind of anxious to find out who I am, and the same for me with them. But you know, I told them, I said, when I come out to visit, my time is yours, and so you know, I offered to them if they want to, you know, I'm happy to come out early to the parish and spend the day there and have a meal with their team and their staff, and to get to know them and get to know their ministries. And so that's the first order of business, is to get to know who's who and what's what, and particularly the parishes, to meet with the people, to find out who they are, what their concerns are, what their hopes are, so then, you know, eventually down the road, some clarity begins to unfold as far as what's the pastoral plan, and what's the direction in which where we lend emphasis. So those are the kind of the first order of business, if you will.
With that feeling, what changes would you hope to bring as the new bishop of the diocese?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm not sure that I want to bring any changes. You know, if changes are necessary, well then yeah, we can look at that. But I'm certainly don't believe in changes for the sake of change. So you know, I admire Bishop Ramirez greatly. You know, in the time that I've known him on a personal level, I've been following him since he was made a bishop. The high school that I attended in Houston was run by his religious order. So I hate to say this, but I was in high school when he was named to Las Cruces, and so since then, you know, his name was sort of on my radar, and the fact that he was one of the first and few Hispanic bishops in the U.S. So I kind of followed him along and have admired him, and now seeing the diocese, I've seen what tremendous work that he's done to build up the diocese from scratch, and so I think there's a lot to appreciate here. There's a lot of history that I need to learn about New Mexico, about the diocese, and so you know, everything in due time.
You know, you hadn't seen too much in New Mexico until now.
That's true. That's true. And you know, there's between East Texas and New Mexico, there's a very vast desert, and I've driven across a couple of times, and boy, that was a long drive. But No, I've been here. I came when I was in college a couple of times to ski. Had some family who lived in El Paso, and they used to vacation in New Mexico, and so I came with them once or twice. So so that on that level of as a tourist, and I've seen some of the natural beauty of the state. But I know that it is that it's not Texas, and I know that there is a slightly different culture. There's different food, and so I'm open to that. I'm open to discovering and appreciating the beauty and the culture of New Mexico. So I just come open to it.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. I understand. I've heard you're a jogger.
Yeah, I try to be. As an adult, I really haven't enjoyed it, but I do it because you have to if you're going to enjoy Mexican food. Anyway, in the past few months, I've kind of picked it up a step and have kind of rediscovered jogging again, and so I've been doing that and exercising, trying to be responsible with my health and so on. I'm a huge basketball fan.
Really?
And so I met the president of the university, and he's invited me to their games. So I'm anxious to visit their games, and so those are some of my hobbies. I enjoy reading. I like the arts, and I've heard a little bit about the arts here locally. So I'm anxious to see what's available and what I can visit and be a part of. I enjoy the performing arts as well, music and theater. And I come from a large family, 8 children. So I'm used to being around a family environment, lots of nephews and nieces, and most of my aunts and uncles and cousins are in Mexico, in Monterrey. So before the onset of the increased violence a few years ago, I would visit at least once a year, but I haven't visited so often lately. But in any case, I do try to keep in touch with them, if through the internet, and some of them might be able to come to the installation on Thursday.
What do you see as some of the challenges in growing, expanding the diocese, whether that be through religion or through infrastructure needs or whatever? Just
sure. Yeah, I mean, I think there's some immediate challenges, and I expressed this to the priests when I met with them back in January. Just the fact, it concerns me that we're also spread out, parishes and priests, and so my question to them was, how do you live priestly fraternity when you may be an hour away or an hour and a half away from the next parish or the next priest? And so that's a real challenge. And so there's not an easy answer to that, but I really want to explore that with the priests. How do we live? How do we support each other? As brother priests, and be present to each other. For spiritual needs, for social needs, for fraternal needs. And that sort of, in the bigger context, the church has been talking about the new evangelization. It's not that there is a new gospel, certainly not, It's the same message. But the church has been talking, and Pope Benedict has specifically said, he says we need to find new expressions, new energies, and new methods for teaching and explaining the gospel, because the world has changed tremendously, and we can't assume that people know what we're talking about when we talk about salvation through Jesus Christ. And so how we package our message and how we present it to people and to the modern world is a real challenge for us, and I think we need to be open, and we need to have our ear to the ground, be attuned to the culture, and yet in the midst of all of those changes, what hasn't changed is the human heart. That the human heart still basically yearns for truth, yearns for love, desires, community, and so those are essential elements of the gospel message. So I think we can still speak to the human heart, and I think we have to be confident about that.
Will you be working with advisors as you go through the learning process, the indoctrination process you're having? Have you started that?
Yes, I've already had several meetings with the staff here in the pastoral center. I've had several meetings and conversations with Bishop Ramirez. So he's given me lots of information, more than can sink into my hard head right away. But I'll continue to work with those who know what the issues are in the diocese, those who know the history, and to listen to them, and to explore what are the best avenues of doing our ministry.
I'm curious, with that, then how much does it help having a bishop here to be able to rely on, having that institutional knowledge, if you would?
Yeah, well, that's critical, and I look forward to being able to visit with Bishop Ramirez every now and then. I don't want to put too much on him as if he were continuing to be the active bishop of the diocese, but he's offered to help in whatever way that he can, and but also the team that he's assembled here in the pastoral center are very capable professionals, and they have assembled the institutional memory, and so I think I will have lots of good advice from them, from that team, and as well as the priests. I intend to give them my cell number and offer myself to be available to them in any way that I can.
If you would, a little bit about your stance on education and vocation. I had a chance briefly to visit with Bishop Ramirez, and he said that you were very, very, very interested in promoting education as well as the vocations.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I mean, one of my concerns is the number of priests, and we are a sacramental church, and part of our lifeblood of activity are the sacraments, celebrating Mass, hearing confessions, baptizing, celebrating weddings, etc. And that requires priests and deacons, and for most of those it requires priests. And so I've been to Walmart and to Sam's and to Albertsons several times, but I've never found an aisle that says priests. And so you can't simply mail order a priest or or find them on a shelf. They come from families, they come from communities, and they have to be fostered. And so my point is that we have to create environments in homes, in communities that foster vocations to married life, vocations to the missions, vocations to religious life, and vocations to priesthood. And so that's certainly one of my concerns, and it's one of those things that we can't relegate to one person or to just a team of people. That's something that we all have to be a part of. And with regard to education, my emphasis with regard to education comes from my own personal story and my history. My dad had dropped out of school growing up in Mexico, rural Mexico. And he lived on a farm, and he didn't like school, like most kids don't, or a lot of kids don't. And so he said, when he told his dad he didn't like school, his dad said, "Okay, I need another hand on the farm." And so he went to, dropped out in 6th grade and started working on the farm, and realized that it was kind of a dead end for him. So he went into the big city and found odd jobs to do, and he realized how difficult life was, to get ahead without an education. And so that was his constant sermon to us, his children, to stay in school and to get an education, because even though we may not use it directly, it will open doors for us, doors of opportunity. And I remember him showing us his blue-collar, rough hands, and he would say, "Look how hard I have to work to put a roof over this family, and to put food on the table, and thank goodness God has blessed us, and we're okay. But," he said, "don't make the same mistake that I did." And I just believe that education, not only does it open opportunities for us, but it opens a different horizon for us. It helps us to see the rest of the world, and to understand the rest of the world. And I think the important thing is to learn how to learn, and that we keep learning throughout our lives. And that's important as human beings, not just to get a higher paying job, but to be the best person we can be.
And then one final question. With the changes going through the church, obviously, it seems to me personally just a bit ironic that on the day that you come in as bishop, we have a pope that's leaving.
Yeah.
So obviously, a lot of change,
right.
Even in our little corner of the world here. How do you help people like myself, Catholics like myself, deal with that and be able to move on,
right.
With that, taking into account that there's a lot of TV stories, there's a lot of news out there about the ills, the pratfalls of the Catholic Church, and all of that. How do we keep that in perspective?
Yeah, it's it is a challenge, but in all of this, the fact that there will always be challenges in the world. There were challenges of evil in society, of evil and corruption in where you wouldn't think it existed, and that will always be with us. Where human activity is present, there will always be an element of darkness, an element of faults, of human faults. because we're not perfect, because we sin, um, um, and and even those striving to do good, as in the church, that it's not a perfect institution. Where I don't need to tell anybody that. We've seen that through history, and we've seen it recently. But that doesn't mean that we throw in the towel and throw out the baby with the bathwater. The baby is still alive, and the baby is still extremely valuable. The baby meaning the faith and the church. That it's still an instrument of salvation. It's still an instrument of truth and of compassion, of love, where people find solace. And yes, there will be bad behavior. There will be bad apples, but and it will always be a temptation to lose faith. But the challenge is not to, because we abandon our faith and we kind of are led into despair, led into simply a worldly dead end, if you will. Our faith opens up for us a kingdom that is beyond this world. That's what Jesus came to preach and to inaugurate. And what's encouraging for me is, I go visit communities, I visit parishes, and I see people, I see the faith alive, and people who have been touched by the compassion of others, people whose lives have changed because of their faith, because people believed in them, and because they believe in God, who has touched their lives in some way. And so for every one of those bad apples or those bad stories, there are hundreds and thousands of tremendously heartwarming and moving stories. And of course, that doesn't always make the headlines, but that's where we as pastors are. We can't abandon the sheepfold for one bad sheep.
Will you see Mass? Will you yourself see Mass?
I will. Yes. Yes. I'll be the Mass will Archbishop Sheehan will begin the Mass, and then once I'm officially installed at the beginning of Mass, I will be the main celebrant.
Now, will you celebrate Mass at the various churches, the various parishes?
Absolutely, absolutely. I will be celebrating Mass every Sunday at different parishes. And in fact, this coming Sunday, I'll celebrate the 11 o'clock Mass at the cathedral. Yeah. So I'm really looking forward to that and getting to know the communities and the people and visiting with them.
Because I've just come to understand that people, they like that. There's a great sense of comfort, a great sense of unity in knowing that the bishop is willing to come out like that and meet with the people and be a part of the community in that regard, and it really helps.
Well, sure, yeah. My job is to love the people. That's what a shepherd does. He loves his sheep, and you can't love someone you don't know, so you have to get to know them. And so that involves listening to them, and sometimes, obviously, I can't get to know everyone's story, but generally as communities, and to be present to them, and to express my prayers and concern for them. I think that's necessary, and that's my job, and that's what I'll do. Visit the communities, and I'm anxious to get to work.